All right, folks, let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us tonight at for the Minneapolis 2021 Southwest LRT Update Town Hall. My name is David Davies. I am the Outreach Coordinator for the project that covers the City of Minneapolis. Just wanted to welcome you once again. We're going to get right into it with the agenda and just a couple housekeeping items before I turn it over to the Chair of the Metropolitan Council, Charlie Zelle. We're going to this is just covering our agenda topics for the night. We will start with some opening remarks and run through the project overview. We'll look briefly at a recap of 2020 before getting into the 2021 construction overview. That'll be the bulk of the presentation. And we will take a few questions. I'll cover this in a second before segueing into a larger Q&A. So we will be able to take a couple questions here and there, but we are going to save time for a larger Q&A segment at the end of the presentation. Just some housekeeping items, some meeting logistics. So one of my jobs tonight is to help try to keep things rolling along. But please mute your mic when you're not speaking. Try to keep that mic muted. And I will be kind of rolling through. If we're hearing feedback or background noise, I'll be kind of going through and trying to make sure people are muted. But you are able to unmute yourself when you are ready to speak. If you're if you want to be on video, you don't have to be on video, but if you want to be on video and you're having audio or video issues, try closing other applications, any other big, like your browsers, or if you have other applications like Zoom or Open, just try to make sure those are closed. That might improve sound quality. And of course, if we can't hear you in general, turning off video might help to just be able to hear things. The meeting is being recorded by the Met Council, and it will be posted on the website within 48 hours. So if folks are having trouble hearing, if you have to drop off at any time, if you want to circulate this to others afterward, you'll be able to do so other people can see this meeting.
Will participants' video be in the recording or just yours?
This screen is being recorded. So whatever is kind of on the screen is being recorded, Jeremy.
Yes, thank you, because I think some people are concerned about their privacy in terms of
absolutely. If you don't want your face to be on video, it's maybe a good chance. Just might want to turn the video off. We are going to, like I said, we'll have a presentation that will include some periodic questions. We're going to just take a couple questions as we run through the presentation, run through the corridor from each, just because we don't get your questions selected during that. There will be time later to answer some questions. We'll be taking those, the ones that we answer periodically, we'll be taking from the chat. So please enter those. If you are able, of course, for people on the phone, that might be hard to do. We'll try to get to phone questions at the end, but try to write those down in the chat. If you don't have a question, if it's more of a comment, we'll be trying to collect those and answer kind of groups of questions, themes as we can. And as I said, we'll have a Q&A at the end. At the end of we'll kind of run through this again when it's time for Q&A, but the larger Q&A session, but to request a turn to speak, there's a place on where your video is or by your name to raise your hand. And if you raise your hand by your name, you'll kind of pop up to the top of my window, and we'll be able to see that you want to make a comment or ask a question when it's time. Andy Collum, my colleague, has just helpfully done that, has raised his hand. And so that's an example of how to do that. I'm going to end this slideshow, and there'll be a couple little transition points here, and turn it over to the Chair of the Metropolitan Council, Charlie Zelle, for some opening remarks. Chair, take it away.
Thanks, David. And thank you, everybody, for coming this evening. I'm Charlie Zelle, chair of the Met Council, and I'm a corridor resident, so your neighbor. So hello, neighbors. I see a lot of you that are very familiar with this project, and I of course see you walking around and seeing my friends. So you're as curious as I am, and I think we are looking forward to this town hall that kind of do an update about what to expect in the year ahead, and kind of what we've done in 2020, and be as transparent as possible. First off, I want to just recognize some of the public policymaker officials who I've seen in the room, starting out with our Senator Dibble, who's here, and Representative Hornstein. Good to see you. And I know we have our council member, Lisa Goodman. Hello, Lisa. And we have a few Met Council, a lot of staff. I won't go into that, but we have a council member, Deb Barber, who's chair of our transportation committee, and it's great that you could be joining us tonight. And I'm probably missing, some official, but I just, unless you want to speak up now, I just want to recognize that this is such a high-profile project, and I really appreciate the conversations we've had with city council members, with Hennepin County commissioners. I would expect Commissioner Green, who's been very close to this project, might be coming in tonight. This is a project where I have to constantly thank you for your patience, your understanding. It is the biggest infrastructure project in the history of Minnesota, and it's going right through our neighborhood. So I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know. Obviously, we appreciate and understand its disruption, and I think part of what we want to dispel is any of the mysteries that we might be encountering toward the year ahead. And we've had certainly plenty of hiccups, and schedule is one of those, and we'll kind of get into that and kind of where we are. Now, just reflecting on 2020, I mean, what a year when we had not anticipated, and yet this project kept going. Probably the most significant thing was in September getting the full funding agreement from the federal government. The Federal Transit Administration has now guaranteed $928 million that will go toward the Southwest Light Rail project. We think about that $2 billion project. I would kind of describe it as being two U.S. Bank stadiums built in a narrow corridor over 14 and a half miles. And when you think about light rail projects around the country, this is as complicated as they get, going through residential areas, but of course, tunnels, flyways, wetlands. It's kind of freight rail co-locations. It's kind of got them all the complications you could imagine. This, I would say, in 2020 there was active construction up and down the line. Probably more if you ever drive out toward Eden Prairie. Just follow the cranes. You can see a lot of activity in the other 5 cities that this project is in. 8 out of the 16 stations are actively under construction. 23 of the 29 bridges are under construction. 5 of the actual 8 tunnels, there's 8 tunnels in this project. They're all under construction, and you can kind of really see the progress. So as I mentioned, no big surprise. It's that these projects of this scale come with risk, and unforeseen issues arise. We have 2 of them right in our area in Minneapolis. One is the complication with the building the tunnel, which is right in our neighborhood along the Sika, the Calhoun Isles condominium project on the foundation area. We're redesigning a way to make sure that we are taking every measure of caution that we do it right. That will take more time and more money, but it's too important for a project that's going to last generations, and we expect it to be great when it's done, but we want to do it. We want to do it right. And the other is this corridor protection wall that runs, from Glenwood Avenue all the way up through Bryn Mawr along that BNSF track. That came in later in the design of the project, so it wasn't part of the original contract. So now we're actually designing, scoping, and understanding kind of what it takes to build that wall, and that's a big project by itself. So Jim Alexander is going to give you more details on that, and we have a presentation to kind of talk about what to expect in 2021. But I do know that it's very much in the news today that we're going to see some delays. So we want to be pretty transparent about the fact that, and I've run into a few of you just walking around the neighborhood, and you kind of say, well, this isn't on schedule, and you're right. I think we got to take a hard look and look at ways now that we could resequence the project to look for efficiencies and ways that we can manage those two elements, but also kind of keep the project going. I would say the one thing, and I would just say about big, complicated projects, and this is not an editorial, but it's based upon my experience as MnDOT commissioner for a number of years. When you get a project of this scale, this is not unusual. So in a way, to say it is a delay, it is, but we're not surprised. And I actually have great confidence, spending a lot of time with our project staff, our consultants, and actually our contractor. We have a good partnering relationship to kind of get the right answers. And when we know more about what that schedule will mean, we're going to have a chance to share that with you, and we expect to do that later in the year. But I think we are in the right place, making the right decisions given the complications of what we're facing. I'll just say a couple other quick things. A great appreciation to our partners, really Hennepin County commissioners, staff, weekly meetings and daily meetings for our staff but I think that we really kind of are, have it kind of hold hand in hand in dealing with this important project. So we haven't lost our commitment to get this done in as best way as possible. So I'm just going to turn it over to Jim Alexander. The real purpose of this meeting is to get away from sending you an email or having David call you and the weekend before something happens and say, guess what, there's going to be a jackhammer in your backyard. And that stuff happens, and we're so sorry about it. I get that these schedules move around, and we said one thing and it doesn't happen. But we're going to try to get ahead of this game and give you a big overview. Okay, what's going to happen this next year? I mean, and it's, spoiler alert, it's going to be disruptive. We're going to have more of that. But I think everybody that I've talked to appreciates when we kind of be upfront about what we're facing. We want to work with the city. And by the way, great kudos to the Minneapolis Public Works Department that have been incredible with us to work just step by step. And so it truly has been an intergovernmental partnership. And when it gets down to the actual specifics, it's the Minneapolis Public Works group that really is working through with us how to manage the project with the least disruption, but knowing that that what is happening is going to happen. So we want to tell you what it is. So I know we're going to have a chance for questions and hear from you, but I think it's good to give us a little overview from Jim Alexander, who's our the lead project director of Southwest Light Rail, that kind of talk through what we're kind of more specifically as we work through the corridor, what we're going to expect over this next year, and I'll be watching right along with you. So, Jim.
All right, thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me? Okay, David, am I coming through?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Jim Alexander, Project Director. Some of you know me. I recognize some faces on the screen here. Good to see you all tonight. Thanks for spending the evening with us. What I wanted to do is we have a series of slides and we'll share this, post this on our website, but want to share a series of slides talking about really work that had gone on in 2020 and as we progress into 21, talking about what's going to be up and happening. So, David, I think do I have control of the slides then?
You should now.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and we've already seen the topics, but we're essentially going to cover 2020 work and then get into 2021. And we'll pick a few Q&A after as we go through, and then we'll have Q&A after we're done. And meeting logistics, I don't know if we need to go through that, so I'm just going to get down right to it here. The familiar slide to a lot of you, I think, just 14.5 miles. The chair had mentioned 16 stations, and what we're building. We're really focusing tonight on the Minneapolis area. So we'll get into the kind of where we are right now. Is this you look at this LRT construction sequencing process? We really start in the underground, working at utilities, and ultimately leading up to testing. We're kind of in the middle of things right now with building structures and getting stations up, working on track. And that'll be kind of the theme as well for next year. And I'll kind of go into highlights of 2020. Just as the chair mentioned, we did receive the full funding grant agreement, the FFGA, in September. And so that was a big milestone for us. Overall, the project, we're about 35% complete on construction. And as the chair mentioned, if you have a chance to go out and look at the western suburbs, you'll see a lot of bridges out as you maneuver out that way toward Eden Prairie. One big piece that we have accomplished is a private utility work. This is one kind of culprit, if you will, that really plagues projects like ours. And we're about, we're pretty close to 95% done with utility work. So that is a big milestone for us. And you see the other stats here, as the chair had mentioned. So we'll start from kind of west to east. This is familiar for some of you, excavation of the Kenilworth Tunnel. We're going to talk about this a little bit tonight in terms of where we are in heading in 2021. But this is essentially the first cell construction being constructed. You can see, I think I'll try to use my prompter here. You can see the whaler, the struts here, and we have the whalers on the side here. So what you kind of see is the sheet piles that have been driven in through here. We're pretty close to being done with all the sheet piles. Should finish that up in February. We do have a segment that's next to the Calhoun Isles Tower and the garage that we're going to talk about. But the Secant Wall you've been hearing about, some of you have been hearing about. But that's the work on that tunnel thus far. On the next slide. So freight rail work, quite a bit of work has been done thus far. We shared a slide similar to this and when we did the freight rail safety review back in September of 20. And areas in green are the freight pieces that have been completed thus far. In yellow are still to be done. And we, of course, have the area where the tunnel is going to be going, where we shifted the track to the east a bit. We'll be shifting that back once the tunnel is all constructed. And here's kind of an image of what that looks like in terms of, you can see the old track here and the new track improvements here with the new rail and the ties and the ballast there. So we really believe that we're doing we're really improving the freight rail infrastructure as we're building the SWLRT as well. This is a new freight bridge that goes over Cedar Lake Channel. That was focused a lot of activity. I know a lot of disruptive with the pile driving on that. Where this inspector is standing, we're working on a bridge about this location for the LRT bridge that's kind of going underway, and I'll talk about that as we get into 2021 slides. We're over near Glenwood. I wanted to spend a little time on this image here and kind of focus on these areas over here. I'll kind of move this guy around. This is where the Glenwood Bridge was formerly located. It used to go across right through here. So we got to take that out to build what we're working on here. So we have retaining walls that would have been under construction on the north side, and we are currently building the bridge piers for the LRT bridge. So at the end of the day, once this is all completed, there will be two bridges here. There's a roadway bridge on the east side of Glenwood, the LRT bridge that will come through it, It'll be the same roadway grade as the roadway bridges, and then there's the west component of the Glenwood Bridge that ultimately will be built. Here's an image just north of the future Royalston Farmers Market station near downtown. We have a lot of retaining walls through this area. And you look off in the distance, we start a bridge structure that goes over 5th. And this is another image looking at, you can see Target Field in the background there. This bridge structure will end up carrying LRT around Mary's Place and all the way over to Target Field Station to link up to our existing system. So in terms of construction communications, see the stats here. We've got over nearly 17,000 subscribers, 46% open rate. It's a pretty good percentage, I'm told, by our outreach and communications staff. And number of hotline calls, 140 from Minneapolis in 2020. And David Davies can attest. He's fielded many more calls than that, non-hotline calls and emails that we continue to receive and respond to. So we'll get into the 2021 construction activity as we currently see this work laying out here. So we're going to work from the east to the west, starting out at the Royalston area, and I'll start with. Let me see my slide here. So we're gonna talk about some of these maps here. Where I'll show we got a few of these, and I'll get you oriented of what all the symbols mean. The intent here is to show areas of where there's going to be kind of more impactful activity, if you will. We're really looking to have activity along the whole corridor through Minneapolis as well as the other cities, but these are intended to show in blue where pile driving will be occurring, and in this violet, this is where lay down and staging areas are continuing to be. We also have a symbol in pink. This is essentially a haul route. Essentially, you can see us going along the whole corridor here. And probably should have backed up the green line, and the yellow circles denote the line for Southwest LRT and the stations. So at Royalston area, we'll have for that bridge that I talked about that goes over 7th here and makes its way into Target Field Station. We'll have some pile driving happening in the spring and the summer to finish out that the piers on that bridge. As we progress towards Royalston, we have some laydown area up in this location, and we'll also be doing some work on the station itself, as well as retaining walls through this area. So there will be some pile driving activity up in that reach. As we move down the Glenwood Avenue Bridge, one thing I want to point out is that we had anticipated to have this bridge up and running for our vehicle traffic and later on in this year, and that is not going to happen, given where we are with this with our schedule. We'll talk about the corridor protection barrier here in a minute. It's kind of coupled with that, but we are looking at least a year delay for that bridge. So we're focusing on 2022 to get those 3 bridges constructed and back in operation. As we move, continue westward, down at Bassett Creek Valley Station, we have a laydown area here. We actually have a batch plant. If you've noticed, if you go up Van White Boulevard, you'll see a concrete batch plant that's specifically for this project. That's where the project will be getting a lot of the concrete for the tunnel construction, and it's used for other elements we're building in this reach. We're also showing some pile driving potentially at this location is for an elevator pit. We'll ultimately have a bridge going over to Bryn Mawr Meadows. At this juncture, probably likely it may not happen in 21, but wanted to put that on there just because we might be able to get that toward the end of the year here. We'll have to see how things progress. As we move along down to Bryn Mawr Station, we have another elevator stair pit, and I'll show you the image of what that's going to look like. And we have some retaining walls up on the bluff that need to be worked on. So all those are going to be pile supported. And then we have another lay down area south of Bryn Mawr there. So this is just kind of a recap of the noise and vibration activities in the Glenwood area, the Royalston, and that target field up in that Glenwood and the North Loop area. And we just, there will be constant activity at the Royalston station, particularly working on those retaining walls that I spoke of. And then as we make our way into toward Bryn Mawr Station up to Glenwood, certainly the pile driving, as I mentioned. Another piece we'll talk about is the corridor protection. We anticipate working weekends on that reach, essentially from Bryn Mawr Meadows, the Bryn Mawr Station over to about that Glenwood area to work on the corridor protection. And I've got some images to talk about that here in a bit here in our PowerPoint slide. This is a familiar slide that I think some of you may be recognizing. This is the Bryn Mawr Station, where we have the station itself here, and if I can move this guy, we have the vertical tower here that houses the elevator and stair, and then we have the pedestrian bridge that goes over to the bluff to the frontage road along 394. So you can't really tell so much in this, but back in the background, there are some retaining walls here. So we'll have piles to be driven for those walls and piles to be driven for this guy here. And there's also up here that you can see behind, you can't see behind the station. To kind of get you oriented out in the field, if you've been out there along the trail, this platform area is where that pile of dirt currently exists. That's a surcharge that we have used to compress the soils. That helps us consolidate the materials to below where the foundation is going to go, so we don't have to do a deep foundation. So we won't be doing pile driving for the station itself. We're essentially took care of that with the surcharge. We're able to do that just because of the nature of the soils that we're dealing with at that location. So the corridor protection wall. So this is one of the items that has caused us to take a look at our schedule. We're essentially looking at a pretty long reach. It's see if I can get my cursor to agree with me here. Hang on a second. Well, it's not quite. Here we go. So I'll just kind of bring my cursor. I might change the color on this so you can see it. Well, that's a little bit different. So the corridor protection essentially runs from Bryn Mawr Station all the way up past 94. Now, there was a lot of discussion. I see Barry, I don't mean to call you out, Barry, but you were involved in the what this wall is going to look like. And you know, at that time, we knew that BNSF, who runs their trains through this area, had essentially said, if you're going to build on our property, you need to build a corridor protection between their freight and our LRT. And so we have now designed that from the structural perspective, and but the aesthetics were already kind of designed back when we had the community-led initiative back in 2017, 2018. I can say that there might be questions. Are we changing that? That's essentially pretty much intact of what that group did in terms of what that design is going to look like. It's really more of the structural ingredients that go into the wall that we've now refined. We had to get BNSF approval for that, and which is done. And this is really a project in itself. It's there's 600 drilled shafts that are involved to support the wall. The wall is very stout, very structurally secure to withstand any freight rail or LRT derailment through this area. So that's one of the pieces that we're looking at from our schedule perspective to understand what the impacts are, and we can take questions on that as we go. I see a lot of questions are popping up here. We'll get to a moment where we can pause. But it's this reach where we were looking to do a weekend work up through this reach, so we can really improve upon that schedule as we work through that element. These are images back from that study, from that input that we got. This is essentially a Batts Creek Valley Station near Van White that shows the wall, and we'll have this labeling here. Kind of give folks a picture of what this looks like up here. I'll See if I can't get my oval to work here again. Our construction work area is essentially in this zone here, and we're very, very tight. We have freight rail running through here quite a bit, quite a number of trains every day. Of course, here's the wall itself here, LRT, and next to it, and we have to deal with drainage as well, as not a lot of room. And that's one of the challenges of building this corridor protection in this area. As we've been working with our contractor, we understand, we knew that freight rail was going to be a challenge to work against with all the work we have to do, but really seeing it firsthand as we've been experiencing the BNSF activity and the TC&W train activity, we have a better understanding about what those impacts mean to the construction. And so we're using that data to help us navigate with the construction that we'll have for this corridor protection. So David, I will pause there and see if we can take a few questions.
Sure thing, Jim. Going back up a little bit, there's one about due to delay, and this one is referencing soil, but I think just maybe taking delay in general, does it delay the reopening of the Cedar Lake Trail?
Yes, thank you. Good point. Yes, yep. I should have mentioned that. So coupled with the Glenwood Avenue bridge, that trail essentially goes with it. And so as long as we're building that bridge, it's or those three bridges, it's not really safe to have the trail come through here. I think that's what we were asking, the question was asking about here. So we have implemented an alternative detour that we believe is a bit more efficient for folks to get in and out of downtown. It still cuts off just short of Van White here, but goes along Dunwoody and up Hennepin and into downtown. And so if you all don't know about that, David can direct you, but we should have that. That would be on our website. But David, you can maybe help direct folks to that.
Sounds good. And this is kind of getting down into things, but just in terms of extending the corridor protection wall, Jim, is that I think you were talking about how it's from Bryn Mawr, east to Royalston. Does that corridor protection extend down into the Kenilworth corridor?
Well, I can't expand this guy. I was going to try to show the reach. Well, essentially, yes, it runs from just east of Bryn Mawr Station all the way up into the Glenwood area. And we according to our design criteria, we had to follow certain criteria as we built this project or designed this project. And we do have corridor protection at both ends of the tunnel because we're within 25 feet of the freight tracks. And up in this case, it's really a different situation. We're further away from the freight track, but BNSF has requested, and we have done that to add the corridor protection through this reach Bryn Mawr up to the Glenwood area.
All right, and the last one I'll take for now was kind of more of maybe a policy question from Councilmember Goodman about the Met Council asking the governor to renegotiate the wall, given the price was high. Maybe, Chair, you could chime in on that. A shorter or less opaque but still crash-resistant wall would save time and money.
I think that's a great idea, but unfortunately, having been negotiating with BNSF myself, but first as Commissioner of Transportation and also certainly familiar with it now, this has been a long and protracted and then a follow-up environmental review. These standards that is the BNSF, and I should say, because I think there's a question about the Kenilworth corridor itself. The main line, the Wayzata sub line of BNSF, is their main traffic. Lots of trains go through that area. So as you all know, BNSF was reluctant, but with this crash wall, that they really insisted on, and then it was just part of the project. And that was agreed to, a number of years ago. but the actual kind of design and understanding of what it is what's kind of more come to light. There isn't, if there was a less of an option and more efficient, God love it, we would be all over it. But that's, we're really into obligated to have this robust crash wall as it is. I think we've engaged with community on its design. Hopefully it's not, once it's done, to be an eyesore, but I think that for this mainline BNSF track, it's required. The TCW, the track that runs along Kenilworth, that is maybe a couple of, it's a much lower volume, very low speeds. It's a different and we are rebuilding and upgrading the track. So we do not, all our engineers and the railroad aren't requiring a crash wall because we just don't have the speeds, the traffic volume. So that kind of is, and Jim, you can correct me, but I think that's my understanding.
That is correct, Chair.
We'll there are definitely a few more to take, maybe in the larger Q&A, but this is just a quick distance question, Jim. What is the approximate distance from east of Bryn Mawr to Glenwood? So I guess we're kind of saying what's the approximate length of the corridor protection?
Sure, that length is about, well, a little under 1.5 miles.
Okay.
And maybe a couple of logistics things. I'm kind of using terms that folks may not quite understand. The laydown area or staging areas are really areas where the contractor will lay materials. They might, for a temporary portion of time, they may be doing something with equipment in these locations. They'll have trailers at some of these locations. So it's really kind of a space where the contractor is allowed to put their tools and the components they're going to use to build the project. And I think I just got another quick question. I think in terms of working on the weekends, we would be looking at these are all drilled shafts through this reach for the corridor protection, which is really lower noise than the pile driving. We wouldn't propose to do any pile driving or any other really noisy work for this weekend activity here.
And the weekend activity you're referring to now, Jim, is along this Bryn Mawr section. It's not the
that is correct.
Kenilworth corridor, just to clarify.
Yeah, east of Bryn Mawr. All right, so should we move on to?
Yeah, there are some questions filtering in about kind of a little lower in Kenilworth, and we'll get to those as we move on.
All right, so we've progressed down to the Kenilworth area, where we have 21st Street Station, and of course we have some laydown areas. We know this has been a challenge, very disruptive for folks. A lot of it had to do with the sheet piles. Luckily, we are pretty close to being done with all the sheet piles, so that clanging around, but the contractor still needs to continue to use these areas because there's really limited space to store equipment and get their setup going. So as we progress further down onto the across the channel here, we still have pile driving to do. We've essentially finished the south abutment, and we still have the north abutment to do. Contractor has put on pause because of the winter conditions. They're going to resume activities back in this area in the springtime. We expect 2 to 4 weeks to finish up the piles on there, and then they'll be done. But there is another bridge. We have a pedestrian bridge. This is for the LRT bridge. There's a pedestrian bridge that would be built, likely not 21, but in 22 or thereabouts. We'll still have to figure out that schedule yet, but that'll have pile driving as well on both sides of the channel. Another area of interest is the Cedar Lake Parkway. We currently anticipate that having a closure. We had a total of about 6 months to be able to close this off as we work that out with the park board and the city. We're about 5.5 months left. We had about 18 days of closure earlier, and so the contractor has about 5.5 months. Right now, contractor's looking at late summer fall of 21. And I just, you know, I know there's probably a lot of frustration, and I share some of that in terms of, you know, when is this going to happen? Why is it getting delayed? A lot of this has to do with this guy right here, the Secant Wall. We've had to kind of reevaluate how we're handling the supportive excavation. That's essentially how we support the soil so we can build the tunnel inside the tunnel construction. You saw that first image when I was looking at the 2020 construction. And because of the Secant Wall issue, we've had to kind of reconfigure, and we're still working with the contractor to reconfigure the schedule and the sequencing of how this whole tunnel gets built. And what's impacted by that is this when this closure can occur. And so right now, based on what we currently understand with the Secant and how that's going to get introduced into the project, that the Cedar Lake Parkway would happen later this year for in terms of that closure. And I do have some images to talk about the Secant Wall as we get into that in a subsequent slide, so I can kind of show you what that looks like and get a better feel. Again, we'll have haul route going down through here, down the corridor, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, but you can see the pink extends down to Westlake, and we eventually make our way out to Lake Street and out to 100 and 394 to access for concrete primarily. So here's just in words here the work that transpires. Now I want to talk about this extended hours a little bit as we get into the concrete work that we're going to be talking about in a subsequent slide here. But maybe before we go there, this is the 21st Street Station. At this location, there was formerly a surcharge, another pile of dirt, if you will. Now you'll see there's a bunch of conduit sticking out of the ground. Contractor anticipates doing foundation wall work and some of the vertical structure work as they get into this year, and this is really going to be picking up in the spring, summertime. And we talked about this in terms of the pile driving for that north abutment. So I want to talk about the tunnel construction a little bit. Essentially, this is going to be built, and we'd always planned this, to build it in a series of cells. There are 31 cells along the approximately half-mile length for the tunnel. And what needs to happen in each of those cells first is we need to excavate and then fill the bottom up with what's called a concrete seal. And what that does is seals off the groundwater from outside of those sheet piles you see out on the alignment. And essentially provides a dry area for the contractor to build the tunnel itself. And as I mentioned, there are about 31 of these. Now we need to do these seals in one pour, and they take quite a bit of time. It's about 1,300 cubic yards, so that means there's about 130 trucks that are coming through to pour the concrete at those locations at each of those cells. And we anticipate that there would be one concrete seal pour about every 3 to 6 weeks. We'll know more as we get into this first one in February to know how long this is really going to take in terms of how many hours it's going to take. We've essentially directed the contractor to double up on the pumping activity. So essentially we have, I think I've got an image here talking about, well, maybe I can, why don't I go to that real quick, and I can, we work with the contractor. This is just kind of a snapshot of the alignment with Calhoun Isles located here at West Lake Street. This is a depiction of the first concrete seal pour. So you see in red here, that's where the first cell is, where you saw that photo that I first started out with. These yellow circles are where the pump trucks will be located, and we'll essentially be using concrete trucks. They'll be backing up into the pump trucks, and we'll be distributing the concrete into the cell. Now, as we work along this stretch, this red space is going to move as we do more subsequent cells. So the contractor is going to be moving towards this direction to get that work done. And at the same time, they'll be working on that secant pile down the location just south of this area. And so we've been really trying to zero in on how long this is going to take. We do anticipate there's going to be some after-hour activity, but we think that we can contain most, if not all, the concrete placement within the normal work hours, which run from 7 to 6. So it's very possible that we'll have to run a little late to do cleanup before the contractor can wrap things up. And that, as I said, the first pour is going to be happening in February. And after we get that first pour done, we'll know more about the how long this will actually take. Each cell might have its own characteristics depending on the location of it and the access we have to it. It's one of our challenges, is, of course, is just there's very, very limited access along this whole corridor here. So I'll just back up to where I was before. So we talked about the construction traffic and the Cedar Lake Parkway closure as well. So these are images that we have shared in the past in terms of showing what this construction is going to look like. And we essentially have the sheets in place, except for around the Calhoun Isles building, and there's a little bit left down at the north end near the channel. But essentially you'll see some bracing. You saw some bracing in that photo. That's the strut that I mentioned. As the contractor excavates, they'll eventually get down below the water table, and then they'll do what we call a tremie pour, essentially sticking a tube down at the bottom of the excavation and filling it with concrete, and the water gets displaced. We worked out an arrangement with our sister partner at the council, the Met Council Environmental Services. Well, we're going to be discharging the water from these cells into the sanitary sewer. I think maybe some of you had heard, and back in the past, we had thought that we were going to maybe perhaps discharge this into the channel or into the lagoon area just east of the channel. That's we've worked out that we can get this into the sanitary sewer, so we will not be discharging into the channel, into the water body. So getting into the next sequence here, as the construction continues, now the water is out of the cell. We do anticipate that as far as that pumping, that we would do that during normal work hours, again from 7 to 6. We know that pumping noise out there can be disruptive. We have done a lot of work, and we'll continue to focus on this in terms of trying to minimize the impact from noise from those pumps. But generally, we'll be looking during the daytime, the normal work hours, to pump that water out. So once the water is gone, we have the bracing in place, but then the next step is to start building the tunnel itself. And we progress to next slide here, where the tunnel gets built out, and ultimately we get the backfill here and the trails back in place. The freight tracks at this location in particular will be shifted back to its original location. So I want to talk about Secant Wall a little bit. This is an image just picked up on the web to show what a Secant Wall looks like. You can see these are essentially cylinder columns that are essentially drilled into the ground, and each of them are drilled into each other, so they're kind of interlocked together, if you will, and that provides a good seal and a very good structural wall that allows us to build the tunnel in that area where the Calhoun Isles tower is and the parking structure. Now we're doing this because we saw some ground behavior that we weren't quite happy with in terms of how that might behave when we get to pushing in the sheets next to Calhoun Isles. So we took a pause and said we need to come up with another method of that support. This is essentially called a supportive excavation. And so we're pursuing a secant wall, which is a much more stout structural wall that can be used for these purposes. Our excavation won't look exactly like this, but we have struts. You can see these pieces off in the distance, that the white numbers Those are called struts, like you saw in the photo, and the whaler that it's connected to that runs along the wall itself. And so we're in the process of working out the details with the contractor on this, and we hope to get this finalized very soon so we can get it implemented out in the field. And we covered that slide. And we'll kind of step down to Westlake Street area. So we are doing a lot of coordination with other projects, specifically the Westlake corridor, where they're looking to build another apartment tower at that location. They're going to look to close the north end of that Abbott-Chowan loop. That maybe I could go back to the last slide here. And so down south of Westlake Street Station, you see the Chowan and Abbott roadways here. This is what it's going to finally look like, but until then, we'll be closing off. So Abbott and Chowan kind of link up to this location up here, and we'll be closing that off. Actually, that other project will be closing it off, but we will benefit from it. And the intent is that they need to do some utility work in that area, so thus it's going to be closed for throughout 21 once that begins in the spring. We'll be able to give you updates as we progress throughout the year to understand when that traffic can get back into connected eventually. So we are also coordinating other construction activities in the area as they come online. Continue to meet with the county and city staff to understand what everybody's doing out here. I know there was concern back when we originally had the Cedar Lake Parkway closure, and we're really trying to stay on top of that to make sure that we're all on the same page. Other areas, the staging and laydown area that I mentioned, will have similar situation down at that area of the Chowan and Abbott near Westlake Station. So here's an image showing Westlake Street Station. Here we have two vertical towers that are around the Westlake Bridge there. One here and then one next to here, and then of course the station running along here. This station and the elevators and stairs, this will be supported by a drilled foundation system. We were able to do that here as opposed to the channel because it's we can actually do a drilled system. The channel are really kind of limited to doing a pile driving setup. So there will be work here in 21, similar to what we're looking at 21st and Bryn Mawr, where there'll be foundation work and start to work on some of the vertical members of the station itself. So I wanted to touch on freight rail improvements as I showed that image in the past in terms of the work that's been done in 2020. We have still these areas in yellow that still need to be completed. And we see that we need to do this over weekend days to do this. And this is really, we have to work with the freight rail schedules to make that work. Now, I'll be the first to acknowledge the challenges and the disruption we had with the Labor Day weekend closure, or the work we did where we went overtime and in the evening. We do not see the need to work in the evenings for these segments, but we do see that we will have to work during weekends to get this accomplished. But at the end of the day, this will be a much improved segment for the freight rail. As you saw that image, it's really enhancing the safety of the station. Similar, just due to the confinement of the Westlake Street area under the bridge here, and for the station, with all that's going on, we see that we'll need occasional weekend work at these locations as well. So, David, I'll pause there for some questions.
Sounds good. And we are going to kind of back it up to more that West 21st Street area and kind of work our way back down a little bit. We had a question earlier on about corridor protection coming specifically. The question, Jim, says Cedar Lake Parkway to West 21st, maybe amending that to like when the train comes out of the tunnel, since they're separated up until that point, up to 21st between freight and LRT. Given that electricity and fuel really don't mix, and a whole neighborhood of people living there, to what extent do we have corridor protection? Is there a wall between the LRT and the neighborhood? What does that area look like in corridor protection?
Right. Well, in terms of corridor protection, again, going to our design criteria for less than 25 feet, we do have corridor protection at this location where essentially LRT comes out of the tunnel and ends up crossing the channel on the bridges. Similarly, as we get into the tunnel on the west end, we have corridor protection at those locations.
All righty. We had a question from Representative Hornstein about soil issues around the Secant Wall. Does that affect the freight rail? How does the soil issues and the Secant Wall impact the freight rail coming through the corridor and associated safety issues?
Sure. Oh, good question. So maybe I'll start with the soil conditions at the Secant Wall here area. Well, as we were pushing in the piles with that press-in piler, we actually had two of them, we were seeing some ground movement, and we were monitoring that very closely, both on the rails and also adjacent structures. And we had seen that this was coupled with the presence of some boulders that we encountered, larger materials. Boulders essentially is a rock that's 12 inches or bigger. There was also cobbles. We encountered some railroad debris. Those impacted the pushing in the sheets. And when we encountered those materials, it caused the ground to behave not like we wanted to happen. So we said we're going to have to take a look at a different system. So that's how we got to the Secant Wall. All along this, as we've been doing the work, we've been closely monitoring the freight rail, and we have had some settlement of freight rail, but we are out there to fix that right away because trains have to keep on running, and so we can't hold them up. So if we did detect a certain level of settlement, that would be addressed right away. And also, just kind of add in terms of the soil conditions, we are improving the subgrade of the rail corridor as well. So it's not just plopping down ballast and tie and rail. We're improving the subgrade. We actually had some very soft soils under the Westlake Street Bridge. That was one of the reasons why things took longer than anticipated, because we had some soft soils that need to be taken out before we could put that rail back in place. So I think I got to all the questions in that.
I think so, and I mean, Representative Hornstein, you can chime in certainly if there's any clarification there.
Maybe if I could add to that, we had press-in piling along this whole reach. That was our original program, and because of the presence of the boulders, that caused us to take much longer than we anticipated. It really impacted the time in terms of how long we thought it would take to get the piles in. The press-in piler, it has normally these sheet piles are put in with vibratory means or pounding, and of course we didn't want to do that because of the potential impacts from those activities. And so when we're using the press-in piler, it's not as robust to be able to push something into the ground or get something in the ground that a vibratory hammer would do. And so that's where it just ended up taking longer than we had anticipated.
And I think that also got to Senator Dibble's question, which asked for a little bit more information about soil conditions in that area as well. But there's also kind of a segment of questions, Jim, just clarifying the pouring of concrete for the Tremy seal. Some folks sound like they're expressing concerns about the number of trucks, so verifying 130 trucks a day. What is that? Verifying that pour day schedule, how many days a week are we pouring? and kind of people are doing the math and saying that pour day, like if there's one every, few weeks, that could take a while.
Yeah, oh, yeah, good. Yeah, we need to clarify that. This it's not straight every day. This is going to be happening once every 3 to 6 weeks, and we will be over a time span of well into 22 as we're doing this. So it's going to be one day's event where we have to do that pour, and then we're done with that Trummy seal. But I would add that there's still concrete to be done, because you can imagine if we go back up to the tunnel structure, we have concrete to place for all of these guys that are, all the walls and the roof and the base. So, but that doesn't anticipate that we'd have that multitude of trucks at any one time. For this concrete seal, it just happens to be it's 100 foot in length. Generally, not all cells are 100 foot in length, but most of the cells are, and that's where we have the great quantity. And so this will be done. This will be poured once every 3 to 6 weeks, so it's not like a daily activity.
Okay, we'll take a couple more from the chat on this segment, and then we'll kind of segue into Q&A for the overall corridor here. But just wanted to get to this one since we were just talking about the pouring days, Jim, and the Tremie seal, about the displaced water. Is it getting pre-treated before going into the sanitary? And is there a way to ensure the rate of discharge doesn't exceed the sanitary capacity?
Yes, I might need a little help from Andy Collum, our resident engineer, but maybe I'll try to answer part of that. I know we have been working very closely with Met Council Environmental Services on both the quantity and the quality of the water in terms of what goes in. Andy, maybe you could speak to what we're doing in terms of turbidity and.
Sure. Yeah, I can jump in here, Jim. Generally, the pre-treatment will be for things like turbidity, like Jim said, prior to going to MCES. It won't be treated for other chemical or other types of, particulate, or I shouldn't say particulates, but other types of compounds in the water. That's why it's going to the sanitary sewer. That's why it's going to MCES, so that they can take care of that. That's actually a better solution for us. So MCES will have the bulk of that.
Yeah, maybe I could add to that this isn't a contaminated area, so we don't have contaminated materials, but there could be a high phosphorus content. That was one of the concerns about if we were to discharge into the lagoon or the channel, that we might promote algal bloom, which I know is a big concern. It's our concern as well, and so that's one of the reasons why we're looking to go to the sanitary sewer.
Yeah, I'll just add, Jim, because the second half of that question revolves around capacity. We've been working hand in hand with the folks at MCES to determine, what our discharge rate is and how much flow or capacity they can handle. And between us and them, it's been evaluated, and MCES has offered to us that they do definitely have enough capacity to handle our discharge.
Great. Thank you. Let's see, kind of going off of that displaced water question too. There's a question about research about impact of the displaced water table, the water that we're taking out, and the level of Cedar Lake, how that may affect or impact the level of Cedar Lake or other connected lakes.
Jim, did you want to take a run at that one?
Maybe you could take that, Andy.
Yeah, I think what's important for that concept is that we're putting the seal in to stop the groundwater from percolating into the excavation or into our work zone. So essentially, it's not like it's a constant discharge of groundwater. It's localized, it's contained. There's no more groundwater coming into the cell there's virtually no water coming into the cell once the seal is placed. So my understanding is that there's no impact.
And I wanted to just follow up here with folks as we're kind of segueing it. I'll take one more from this segment before we segue into Q&A, but we are kind of taking these questions. We'll group them up, and certainly we're not going to get to everything by 7:30, but we will be compiling these questions and answering them, as we can, in a document after this, as a follow-up. So just wanted to, let's see, there was one more that I wanted to grab before we kind of went through here. Kind of at the Westlake, the pile driving at Westlake Station. I think there may be, Jim, I don't know if I didn't catch that, but driving pile at Westlake Station, loudness, impact, maybe verifying the type of pile driving that's going to be done at Westlake Station.
Yes, it should clarify that we will not be doing pile driving at this station. We can do what's called an auger cast pile, essentially drilled into the ground and filled with concrete. And so essentially drilling equipment is not exceptionally noisy compared to the vibration and the noise from pile driving activity.
Great. All righty. Jim, I think, does that conclude the actual presentation part, or did you have any?
Well, let me go through down. Yes, I think it was just down to.
Okay.
I think we just have discussions, Q&A here.
Sounds good. I'll take back.
I don't have a way, this is Jeremy, I don't have a way to raise my hand on this screen. So if I wave like this, will somebody notice?
That'll be hard, Jeremy, considering I can see about 5 people at a time while we have a presentation up. So just as a reminder, let's see, let me get to the next slide here. Everybody's doing a great job muting. But to raise hands, we're going to kind of switch back and forth, starting with chat and go to raised hands. You should be able to. Hopefully everybody can see this. But
there is no way on my screen to do a raise hand.
Okay.
Using the WebEx client. I'm not on the web browser version. I'm on the app that was downloaded.
Okay. Well, we'll try to get as many as we can, Jeremy, including you. But for those that are on the browser, you should be able to, next to your name, there should be a hand. If you're kind of highlighting your name, you should be able to click raise hand. Should just a little hand like this. And if there's Tom Beaumont just was able to do it, and then he put his hand down. But those pop up to the top of my screen. If not, we'll kind of check in with people intermittently as well too. Got a lot of questions. Clearly, we're not, like I said, we'll get as many as we can, so we'll get right into it. I wanted to get back up to a question from Glenwood and about just notification for impactful work, Jim, and just talking about, I know we've got a lot of businesses up there, some residential in the area, certainly in the North Loop, but also a lot of businesses with varying hours, especially evening hours. How are, getting advance notification before some of this impactful work goes on?
Yes, and David, we'll continue to do that. You're yep. Really our primary person out in the arena that continues to work with the Andy's group and the contractor to relay information as we get it from the contractor, particularly if it's more impactful activities. Yeah,
certainly. We want to we try to get that information out as quickly as possible, as soon as it is reliable for folks. I know that it sometimes comes pretty quick, but especially for businesses who are trying to rely on us, rely on some sort of schedule or routine, we hope to provide as much advance notice as possible. Let's see. Going back down, I think we had a question kind of coming my way back down through the corridor and talking about noise testing. I know that's been an issue or a question that's come up a few times, Jim, around the 21st Street station. There are a few properties that are going to have some additional noise testing. Any timeline for that?
Yeah, we're going to be taking a look at this year. We actually have some other properties along the alignment that we're outside of Minneapolis that we're looking at as well. So that'll be a focus that we need to get done. It hasn't gone off our radar.
Got it. I'm trying to group a few questions. This is again from the chat, and then I'll take a couple hands. Hey, Jeremy, got your hand raised. Taking a few questions from about freight rail. So kind of trying to group these together. We have improved rail conditions for TC and W. I'm going to do a multi-part here, Jim. But does that increase the speed in that area? And let's see, I saw a couple others. Do we know if TC and W has fully implemented positive train control? And I felt like there was another freight rail. Actually, this is kind of going a little bit further out near Wooddale. But when do we anticipate switching freight rail to the new track west of Wooddale?
Okay, let's see. Okay, I don't remember the first one. The middle one is positive train control. Positive train control, that's a requirement of all Class 1 railroads. And so the BNSF, the Wayzata sub that we talked about, the Glenwood out to Bryn Mawr area, that's a Class 1 railroad operation. They are required to have positive train control, and they do have that in place. TC&W is a short line. They're not required to have that positive train control, so they do not have that. They do have it on their locomotives, I think, by now, because they have to operate on BNSF track and other Class 1 tracks. The other piece,
go ahead.
Sorry, the next piece about the shift out in Wooddale, Andy, I think we're trying to get that done before the winter cold really hit, and we didn't make it. So it's looking for a spring activity. I think I have that right, Andy?
Yep, that's correct, Jim.
And could you remind me of the first question?
We have an improved rail conditions for TC and W. Will they?
Oh yes, speed.
The wording is, will they be increasing their speed?
Well, that's a question for Mark Wagner. The allowable speed through there is 25 miles an hour, and Mark has said to me, and I think he said out in the arena to you folks that have been on here, that as a good neighbor, he'll continue to run 10 miles an hour. But he could run 25. So that's where it was before, and that's where it would be after we're done.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say, Jim. Our project is upgrading the materials and the track structure that's there, but it's not changing the class of track. So it's still Class 2 track and operates at 25 miles an hour.
A little too. I'll just kind of add to this in terms of while we're under construction, we're actually keeping it. It really comes down to maintenance. How much maintenance do you do to make it? How fast you can go, and also the geometry plays a good part in that as well. And we are maintaining it to a very high grade. So we just want to make sure we're safe while we're under construction. But yeah, it will be status quo from everybody's perspective before and after, from a speed perspective.
I wanted to give the opportunity for a couple folks who are raising their hands. Mary Paddock, you're first in line. If you don't mind unmuting and asking your question.
Yeah, thank you. So these are substantial changes. What are the cost implications of them? And also, what are the schedule implications? And what are the cost implications of the schedule changes?
Sure, there's going to be costs to this. I can tell you that. We don't have the costs identified yet. We're working on that piece. So essentially, the Secant Wall is going to be more expensive than the sheet pile. It also affects our sequencing of the tunnel construction, so we need to look at the cost of that. The corridor protection, adding that to the project is going to be more cost as well. And we also have to look at the sequencing of how that works. And you're right, Mary, in terms of the time, there's a time cost to these pieces as well that we need to understand. So those are things we're currently working on with our consultants and the contractor to get sorted out. But at this juncture, I don't have numbers to provide.
Oh, David, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Always happens. Jeremy, if you don't mind, you're next in line. If you don't mind unmuting and asking your question.
Am I unmuted now?
There you are.
Okay. Well, I typed these are the probably duplicates of what Mary just asked. They're the overarching questions of this whole thing, especially given the press release the Met Council just mailed out today. And we're probably all curious, what is the realistic target now for beginning of revenue service? It's already been delayed once, and now this sounds like it's going to involve a delay into the following year, maybe. And what is the cost overrun associated with the Secant Wall and delays? And it sounds like the crash wall, which I was unaware was any different now than it was when the project was first bid, but apparently it is. Who is absorbing these costs? Is it the contractor? Is it the Met Council? Is it him? Who's absorbing the costs? And finally, will there be corner cutting, like planting fewer trees in our park when you're done, or other kinds of corner cutting, or project scope changes to reduce costs?
Sure. Well, a lot of questions there, Jeremy. I'll see if I can't field those. Maybe I'll start where you left off with the vegetation plan that we have in the Kenilworth corridor specifically. That is part of our agreement with Minneapolis. That's not going away. It's still in place, and we still intend to have that part of the project. In terms of who absorbs the cost, that's something we have to sort out how this is going to flesh out. We have contingency dollars that would be used for this. Do we have enough contingency dollars? That's something we need to assess once we understand the full cost. I don't have costs to give you tonight, and we are working on that. As I mentioned, we're right in the middle of figuring out the Secant Wall. We're in final design on that. We eventually need to get a price from the contractor because this will be a change order. And similarly, for the corridor protection, just maybe to be clear, we knew the corridor protection was coming as we were going through the bidding process. What we didn't have is a fully completed, approved design by BNSF. But we made the decision to move forward because we needed to get this project moving, and it was a risk. And that's where we made that decision to move forward. But we have since gotten the design fully fleshed out. We also know more about how construction works in the Wayzata sub with all the trains running through and the confined spaces we have. And so all those pieces incorporate into where we're looking at our schedule, saying that we think it needs to adjust. Right now, revenue surface, our current schedule says 2023. That was admittedly toward the latter end of 2023. I can't tell you tonight when that revenue surface is going to be, but that's another piece we're working on. It's really all linked together. The cost, the schedule, to understand all those together, they have to come through. And it's just, when you look at the corridor protection or the Secant by themselves, they are tremendous projects on their own. And so we're incorporating that in the whole 14.5 miles. There's a lot of complexity that we need to think about as we're putting those numbers together. But like I would say, as we understand more, we will communicate where we are. We are very interested in getting this nailed down to understand where we are, and we will communicate where this is going to be heading. So did I catch all of your questions? I'm not sure if I got everything.
You did. It sounds like you don't know the answers to many of them yet,
Yeah.
but you're working on it. And
Sorry, it's just where we're at.
no, and I appreciate that. What's happened all along here is kind of a cry wolf thing where, oh, we're going to have dump trucks going all summer. Oh, we're going to have dump trucks going all. So far, we haven't had any of the excavation really get going. And so it's really important to have realistic timelines and dates. We know that project sequences change and everything, but when something's supposed to happen and it doesn't, and then it's supposed to happen later and it doesn't, and so on, it's very frustrating to those of us who want the thing to be done and the disruption to be done and to be able to use it. And well, yeah, that's the main thing. We're interested in the project being complete, and when we see things that were going to happen not happen, it raises questions. So
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you loud and clear on that.
All right. We've got certainly more questions to get to. We are coming up on 7:30. We'll try to get a few more in before that time. Best estimate for total time. Like I know that Jim, we've, part of what this is, we've got a major activity coming up pretty soon here with the Tremy Seal pour. Related to that, the best estimate for the total time trucks will be hauling for the concrete pour. Just trying to get a little more clarity on like the for the duration of the day. What part of that day do you think is concrete trucks really going to and from?
Right. Andy, you can maybe help me out in this, but the latest I understood is we are looking from essentially 7 to 6. But
right. Yep. With some cleanup and kind of tear down after that, but that would be the hours for the concrete trucks that we're looking at. Yep. Correct, Jim.
And like I said, after that first pour, we'll know more about how that went and see if there's any refinement we can do. We're keeping a close eye on that to make sure we keep the disruption down to our minimums as much as we can.
And while we're on that, David, I'll just hit. There's a couple of questions about the number of trucks. Yes, 130 concrete trucks. It's approximately 1,300 plus or minus cubic yards per Tremy pour, 10 yards a truck. So somewhere in that neighborhood.
Again,
you guys heard Jim correctly.
And again, that'll be one day out of that 3 to 6 week time period, and then there'll be another event like that. But there will be other concrete trucks for other elements of the project we're building.
Right. Just wanted to reference. There's a question about pile driving impacts at the channel, that they're disruptive, and are there other methods of using different pile driving technologies that would be quieter or less disruptive for the channel work, is what I'm assuming here.
Sure, right. Yeah, it's unfortunately when we're working in the water like that, it's a challenge to do like a cast in place like we're doing down at the Westlake station. Because of the water body, you really have to do a pile driving. It's the soils are soft up there. We need to get that foundation down deep so it can support the bridges. And we realize it's very disruptive. We are going to be wrapping that LRT bridge up here shortly as we get into spring. And then there will be a respite. We'll have to eventually take out those sheet piles that are in there. But those will come out with less impact than the pile driving, but nonetheless, there will still be some disruption with that.
Got another one about, let's actually, you know what, I'm going to take a raised hand here. Marion Collins is next in line. Marion, go ahead.
Yes, hello there. I actually saw that some other people had related questions, so maybe I'll try to just combine them all together. There's a lot of talk about disruptive work, and they might try to tell us when it is. But most of us, of course, during these times are working from home, and we really need to know. We're teaching from home. We're making phone calls from home. We have kids who are in meetings for school at home. So there needs to be some consideration, and I'm wondering how that's all going to work. And then with talk about weekend work, this talk of, well, when are they going to start work on the weekends? I am tired of Saturday morning, 7 a.m. trucks rumbling through our neighborhood. I mean, the weekend, I wish they had a lot more consideration for the people living around these construction sites, especially on the weekends. So I really would like them to address that and see what they're going to do. You know, they say that they're going to, try to minimize the disruption, but I have yet to see what is the plan for that, considering people are working from home and weekends are a time to not be woken up by trucks going by at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Sure, I understand the concern there. For the freight rail work, we would anticipate that we're looking to work that out during the spring and fall time, where it'll be cooler weather and folks won't have to have their windows down normally. So that's one area that we're looking at. We're looking at possibly 6 to 8 weekends over the year of 21 to do this work, and we'll be announcing those activities well in advance of when those are going to occur. There is going to be some noise related to that in terms of installing the rail. but it's not like a pile driving, but there's still going to be disruption. And it's just something that we'd like to work out during the weekdays. It's just we're unable to. We need to work with around the freight rails schedule.
Yeah, just hoping for not 7 a.m. I mean, that gets really old really fast.
Understood. We can look at that definitely and start later.
Okay, thank you.
CLR, is that Claire? I think that's next. You have your hand raised.
Oh, you decoded me. Yeah, this is Claire Rubeck. So the math seems pretty easy, and I'm looking forward to your written responses. But if you've got anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks times 33 cells, let's be realistic about the timeline. My question, though, is really about the Secant Wall and this first cell that's going to be happening, I believe you said in February. Is this going to be an experiment, or are you confident of what's going to happen in that first cell pour? It seems that a lot of these things are being discovered in the field as you go, and that's not a good way to build this project or to invest care about the community that has to live here.
Sure. Well, we've been reviewing and talking with the contractor about their plan, about how they're going to do this first cell. We've had a lot of meetings to make sure we have things covered. We're looking at the batch plan to make sure that the concrete is good quality when it's coming out, because we can't really afford to have a bad truck come out with bad concrete. We're looking at making sure that that all the equipment is in place in terms of the pumping and how that's going to get distributed into the cell. So we're looking at all those factors to make sure the contractor has a good solid plan before they get going on this.
All righty, and Jim, we are a little bit over 7:30, and we want to leave a couple minutes for closing remarks. But I wanted to just get this last one. So when may the community know more about further, or not further delay, but the length of the delay or any additional costs, if there are any, as we kind of as the project works through those?
Right, that's a very good question, and I can't give you an exact timeline right now. There's just all these complexities we have with both of those elements, and we need to sort through it. And as we get to know more, we will certainly communicate what we understand in terms of the schedule.
All righty. With that, like I said, we're running over at 7:32. Want to be respectful of everybody's time. I'm going to stop. Actually, Chair, I don't think I am able to easily get rid of this screen, but I believe that you have a couple closing remarks.
No, I'll just thank you, David.
Yeah.
And no, I just want to thank everybody for coming and listening, and I think we who are listening to you continue to learn about the concerns. Clearly, we share them, and I certainly have heard a lot about the perfect storm of this project. Obviously, during this pandemic, many people are at home with children, and we kind of hear that having disruption, not just even on the weekend, but early in the morning, is just helpful to at least have clarity about when is whatever is happening. So we really heard that, and we need to kind of be communicating. I've also heard that we could have more of these meetings, and we certainly will look at ways to answer your questions more specifically. David, I think you've been doing a great job reaching out to the resident associations and people, so we want to keep that up. But please know that as frustrating as it is not having all the answers, we share the frustrations, but we want those answers to be right. And when you question the actual competence, that really means we need to double down and make sure whatever we're doing, we actually, that it's the right answer. So I think I've been impressed that rather than rushing to a solution with that Secant Wall, that we've been not only getting a design, but we've been questioning the design and kind of stress testing these so that isn't, as one person suggested, a maiden voyage without certainty. So thank you so much for everybody for giving us your time, for giving us your questions, your concerns, and mostly your patience and understanding. We will always be open and listening again. We'll think about what the best way to do this in the future, and certainly getting more clarity about when these trimming pours happen, when do they happen, and some of the other kind of things that we've noted here from your chat and from your from your questions you've given out to us. So I know it's we spent a lot of time here. Some could stay later, but I think we'll close it out. Again, we've recorded we recorded the whole session, but obviously the specific questions in the chat, we'll post answers, and so you can hear them again and read them again. And in the meantime, you know how to find us. Thank you, and have a great evening. And we look forward to staying in touch with you.